Right. My name is Stephen Dearborn. This is Postmodernist Theories, a collaborative approach, and we will go ahead and get started here in the introduction. So, like I said, my name is Stephen Dearborn. The class here is Family Systems Theories, and the title of the paper is Postmodernist Theories, a collaborative approach. Right. So, this presentation is going to cover a postmodernist approach and the major constructs associated with it in the therapeutic setting, to include the language used, context, and some of the social construction. Also, to be explored as utilizing a comparative method will be collaborative language therapy, narrative therapy, and solution focused therapy. Each of these theories do fall under the postmodern umbrella and have an array of similarities and differences that need to be examined in further detail. So we will go ahead and get started with talking about postmodernism. Okay, let's go into some of these major constructs here. So, postmodernism suggests that people create their own realities and that no two realities are exactly the same. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Is that that's just a piece of postmodernism, as it applies to a therapeutic setting, is that we kind of are the constructionists of our own reality and the way we perceive it. So, and the postmodern movement is best described as a questioning perspective of the bearing and penalties of foundational knowledge and possible meta narratives and how they affect our day to day life. Now, that broken down into some simpler terms, is that knowledge is really, it's ever evolving, it's changing, and that knowledge should be questioned. It is not a black and white term. It is not concrete in nature. Okay. So next, influence of language here. Postmodernism, in terms of language, is the way in which we make sense of the world, whether that be verbal, nonverbal. It is relevant to interpretation. And language is seen through the use of words, and despite most of our conversation being nonverbal. Um, and as it applies to the meaning of words, it is not just the meaning that is given to them when they are said, but how people interpret them when they hear it spoken. Okay. Influence of context. Postmodern thinking can best be contextualized by looking at it from the standpoint of constructivism or an interpretive view. So, the primary or more thematic contexts for postmodernism have been philosophy of science and then also philosophy of language. Started out as a cultural phenomenon in the 20th century, when a shift from focusing on meaning as a reference to looking at meaning as use occurred. So, meaning really used to be, this is what it means. This is what it means to be a certain way, or to act a certain way, or to live a certain way. And it was very much so a concrete notion. When you look at, you know, historically, people, if you think about it in terms of like a religious setting, like, well, this is the way, this is why I am the way I am. And people pull from, different stories to say this is why things are the way they are. And it was very, it is what it is kind of mentality, as far as the meaning goes in their lives. And and I had mentioned from a religious standpoint, when you think of, for instance, the Bible as a context, people are like, well, this is what it says in the Bible, and this is the way it is. That's how things are defined in my life. And like I said, it's very solidified. Now, postmodernism, it challenges those meta narratives and starts saying, hey, well, you could look at it this way or this way or that way, and you could see it from multiple different angles. All right, so now we'll go into influence of social constructivism. Social constructionism under the postmodern umbrella was proven to be instrumental in different therapeutic theories. Social constructionists see knowledge as being constructed as opposed to created. And social constructionists would posit that knowledge and realities are ever evolving and shifting based off of the current belief systems that are held. So that kind of goes back into what I was speaking of previously with, kind of that religious piece, or, and again, that's just an example. This could be anything. Um, but now seeing that these realities of people are indeed evolving and shifting. All right, and some of the differences. So this is going to be differences of postmodern versus traditional ideologies. Again, the traditional ideologies are typically centered around meta narratives, and they're best described by overarching interpretations of events and circumstances that provide or structure people's beliefs and gives meaning to their worldly or spiritual experiences. Postmodernism conflicts with this as it relies more on the aspects of chance and discontinuity. All right. So now we're going to go into the different therapies here and kind of discuss them in a little more detail. First, we'll start with collaborative language therapy. All right. So some of the philosophical underpinnings. So Harlene Anderson established collaborative language therapy as a postmodern methodology to communication, which envelops the concept of language and knowledge as dialogical and relational. Anderson was primarily concerned with the ability of therapy to work for some and not for others, as she explored the elements that facilitated the transformation process in others' lives to bring clients from a place of hurting to a place of hoping. So, collaborative language, there's really no big interventions there. Collaborative language therapy is very much so about the relationship that exists between clients and therapists and kind of how they interact in the um, therapeutic setting. And we'll look more into that as we get into the role of the therapist and some of the interventions, even though there aren't technically any. Um, so the ability to look through a lens of curiosity and exploration with clients should be the goal in utilizing collaborative language. Clients need to be the creators of meaning in the session, while therapists become the co-creators of that meaning. So if you think of it as clients and therapists, they're sitting in the therapeutic session and they're kind of throwing around ideas, talking back and forth. But the whole time, the therapist is very much so engaged and very much so listening and really taking a backseat approach to everything as far as letting the client guide. All right, and we'll get here role of therapist. As I said, role of therapist will be to act as a facilitator and the guide, not a teacher. Therapists must take a not knowing approach to knowledge. This is really important because it's going to make the client feel comfortable in the session. Um, if they think they have an expert in the room, they may not be as inclined to divulge as much information as they would with someone who says, "Hey, I'm here to listen to your story. I want to know what you have to say, and I want to listen to it with an open mind." And the therapist should use circular questioning when speaking with clients. Um, Circular questioning, what that does is the therapist is able to ask a certain question that is going to elicit a certain answer, and while the answer might stray away from that original question, the therapist is going to get back into that same topic, whatever the question was centered around. The therapist is going to come back to that with more questioning and really focus on certain areas. Um, but at the same time, the therapist needs to be able to express a genuine interest in the story of the client. All right. And some of the interventions here. Um, as I said, there really isn't any. It's more about a collaborative language that you'll see between the therapists and client. So, in the beginning phases, clients and therapists, they'll build the rapport and they'll begin speaking of the client's life. And this is a good time to reaffirm the client by asking some of those affirming questions about their life. For instance, clients are telling you they've, had such a rough time in their marriage and they've been juggling everything. Therapists might ask, "Wow, that's sounds like it's been very challenging for you. How have you handled that so well?" And so you're kind of reaffirming the client's experience here. In the middle phase of this, you're going to allow clients to tell their story, and clients will start expressing new meaning behind their stories as they're given the opportunity to speak. Um, and the therapist may even begin to kick around some new meaning with their clients, meaning, hey, that's really interesting the way you just spoke of this. Could you talk about that in more detail? Could you explain that more to me? And it may be a completely new concept for both therapists and clients, but it's something that needs to be focused on because this is coming from the client's reality. At the end of a session or at the end of multiple sessions, therapists are going to help to continue to reinforce any kind of new meaning that clients have come up with, any issues that they've been having in their life. If they've dissolved, great. Therapists will continue to highlight client strengths, encourage them to enact new meaning in settings outside of the therapeutic atmosphere. Right, goals. So the ultimate goal of treatment for collaborative therapy is to empower clients, promote self-change through autonomous decision making, and focus on the client's strength and resiliency. All very important steps in collaborative language therapy. Right. Narrative therapy. Philosophical underpinnings here. So, narrative therapy was developed in the 1980s by Michael White and David Epson. A narrative therapy allows clients and therapists the opportunity to create a logical and coherent narrative for the client's life. The issues or problems and the stories that are told during a therapeutic session create a barrier in clients, which blocks them from seeing the preferred or alternative stories that exist within their lives. So you will see that a lot of times with clients coming into the therapeutic setting is that they're so focused on their issues that they have tunnel vision and they're not really seeing anything going on outside of that. Again, creating those barriers. The philosophical underpinning of this theory is that it allows the clients to recreate their narratives and their stories through constructing new realities and stories surrounding their situation or their problem. How problems are understood and conceptualized. Clients have a saturated problem that they are clearly having trouble detracting from, and that's kind of similar to what I just spoke about with that tunnel vision. The problem is then conceptualized by looking at the lens that the client sees it through. So by therapists being able to hear that story, hear those narratives, um, the therapists are then able to conceptualize and say, here's what I see going on with these clients. Here's how I interpret their story, and hopefully it'll be fairly similar to how clients are interpreting. And then the goal will be to help them to see it through an alternative lens. The lens will provide the clients a look at a new narrative. The new narrative will encompass new forms of expression, goals, values, and worldview. All right, next we'll get into the role of the therapist in a narrative therapy session. So the therapist will know the client's stories, but they're going to make no judgment or biases surrounding them. The therapist will act as a co author, helping them to redefine their story. This will be done by asking an appropriate line of questioning. And when I say appropriate line of questioning, what I mean by that is that therapists will, for instance, they may ask a question of, well, have you considered it this way? What have you, we know, what other ways do you see this story or this problem playing out in your life? What does that mean for you? So they're going to kind of guide the, the clients who are so focused and so tunnel visioned. They're going to kind of guide them down a different road and kind of get them to see, like, oh, wait a minute, I haven't necessarily looked at it from this angle. And that is ultimately going to be what helps these clients to recreate their narratives. So again, like I just stated, the therapist will offer those differing viewpoints, unique perspectives, and ultimately shed light on some of the diverse outcomes. All right, interventions. So this one, along with solution focus, does have some very specific interventions that can be used. So in the beginning, the clients need to be able to externalize their problems by speaking of them in external terms, personifying the problem and allowing clients to realize that they are not their problems. This is really an important step in the narrative therapy process. You want to be able to speak of your client's issues or problems in an externalized fashion. For instance, if you have someone who is presenting with anxiety, you may ask the question of them, what happens to you when this anxiety comes in the room? Um, and by saying that, we have now externalized anxiety and we've separated the problem from the client. In the middle phase of a narrative therapy session, we're going to help to deconstruct the client's problem by clarifying various associations and properties of the problem through storytelling. Um, and this is going to be just really just listening to the clients. You've externalized their problem, you're listening to them talk about the problem, but now we're asking those kind of clarifying questions, and they're kind of starting to think outside the box a little more about their problem. Um, and in the end, you're going to assist in helping the client to explore some of those new areas of thought that they've been talking about. And once they get on the page of a new narrative, and they've kind of lost that tunnel vision line of thinking, and they're thinking of it, um, again, like outside of the box, oh, I didn't consider it this way, and they seem that they're in a good place with that. Therapists are really going to help to reinforce those new narratives as the clients move forward. Goals. So, again, separate clients from their problem, encourage clients to utilize the resiliency skills that they already have in place to minimize their problems, and assign people the role of narrator in their own life story to help them reconstruct meaning in their lives. So, this should be made very clear to clients in the beginning. Hey, you are the narrator. You're taking the wheel here. I want to hear your story from your perspective. Um, no judgment passed. Let's have a conversation. Let's start a dialogue. All right. Okay. Next, we are going to go into solution focused therapy. So, philosophical underpinnings for solution focused therapy was developed by Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg in the early 1980s. Um, solution focused therapy focuses on three main ideologies. If it is not broken, do not fix it. If it is working, do more of it. And if it is not working, change it. So, fairly simple concept, really, with solution focused therapy. Um, really not looking into problems that the client didn't come in with. So, for instance, the client came in saying, I'm having an issue with my boss at work. We're not going to ask, oh, tell me about what happened to you when you were 5. We're not concerned about that in the solution focused therapy session. We're concerned is how are we going to find a solution to you having these issues with your boss? Um, and so, like I said, is um, if it is working, do more of it. So you're going to find out what's already working, what's not working, and if it's not broken, do not fix it. So we're not going to talk about things that are currently working. Clients are in charge of their own processes here, and that much of what they are doing could already be working towards a solution. And we're going to focus on future desires and outcomes by collaborating on goals, which can help clients in obtaining their long-term solutions. So once we kind of discover what those solutions are in the session, we're going to continue to place focus on those. All right, how problems are understood and conceptualized. So problems become a pivotal theme in one's life, leading them to oftentimes focus on nothing else. So clients will look at the problems in terms of absolute black and white terms. Sounds similar? Yes, because this is kind of what we talked about with narrative therapy. But it is something that clients, no matter what the modality of therapy we use, will present with problems in terms of the absolute and black and white. Clients should become aware of how they continue to reinforce these problems in their lives. Okay. The role of the therapist. So, therapists should present with a not knowing, again, approach to knowledge. They need to allow clients to tell their story from their perspective and listen with curious wonderment. Curious wonderment is kind of my own little term I came up with. You really need to show that you are engaged with these clients and really go beyond just being a good listener. You need to be on the same page with them, and um, that's really an important piece in the therapeutic session. And then you're going to ask questions that will elicit a solution focused response. In order to do that, you're going to ask clients, um, tell me about a time when this wasn't a problem for you. If we go back to our example of talking about an employee with their boss, tell me about a time when your boss and you were getting along. So, oh, well, we got along when such and such happened. Great. I've now just elicited a solution focused response from the client because I can reflect on that time with them and help them to establish ways on how to kind of get back to that time. And then, of course, we're going to cheer clients on as they encourage clients to do more of what is already working. Okay, interventions here. So in the beginning, we're going to allow clients to tell that story in a way that they want it to be heard. If there is a central theme, issues such as anxiety or depression, we're going to use scaling questions to provide a numerical value to that problem, and that's going to help to deconstruct the problem. So, for instance, client says, I'm experiencing anxiety. And I'm going to say, okay, or well, therapist will say, okay, um, imagine that anxiety is on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most anxious you've ever felt and 1 being the least anxious you've ever felt. Where would you say that anxiety's at right now? And they may say, well, that anxiety's at about a 6 right now. Oh, okay. So what was it like when when that anxiety was at a 5 or a 4? Um, so what we've just done is we have assigned a numerical value to their anxiety. So we've kind of externalized it, right? And we're also now able to scale it and talk about when it was really bad, when it was better. And we can focus now when they say, oh, well, it was better here. We can focus on that and kind of what was going on in their lives when when their anxiety was at a 3 or a 2, and help them to find those solutions. In the middle, you may ask the miracle question. By asking the miracle question, therapists allow the clients to visualize what a solution might look like and help clients to establish new solutions or reinforce old ones. So the miracle question will be asked as, you know, therapists may ask the clients, say you went to bed tonight and a miracle occurred while you were sleeping. And when you woke up, everything has been solved. Any issues that you had, everything is perfect. What does that look like for you? What does that appear to be? And by asking these questions, the clients are able to visualize what their lives would look like without the problem. Um, and they may tell you, well, I when I woke up, I went to work and my boss was really nice to me, and he asked me how my day was, and you know um, we went to lunch together, and and when you as therapists, once you identify what their quote unquote miracle would look like, you can then begin asking questions surrounding that miracle. Well, when was a time when was there ever a time that you and your boss had these interactions before, kind of like how how you've described in the miracle? You can ask questions like that, and again, it's almost similar to scaling, to where once they identify, well, yeah, during such and such time, and then you can kind of proceed to uh, put them back in that place of where if you act a certain way or you behave in a certain manner, this is where you and your boss are getting along, and they may begin to see that process there. Um, in the end, you're going to continue to help reinforce what is working for these clients, and then, of course, get rid of what isn't. The ultimate goal here is to empower clients to continue doing what brings them happiness. Goals. Okay, so the goal of treatment and solution focused therapy is to focus on client strengths, goals, needs, and wants. You want to empower clients to enact their desired changes and establish long term solution oriented thinking. All right. I'm going to compare and contrast. So there are several similarities behind these three main theories or therapies discussed in the presentation. And conversely, there are several differences as well. So the next two slides will explore three similarities and three differences between the theories. So all three theories do fall under a postmodern view in which language and context work together in constructing realities. They all include the therapist taking a not knowing approach to knowledge. And all three theories are very client centered. They really rely heavily on harnessing the client's resources. Right. And some of the differences here. So, narrative therapy focuses more on the larger cultural stories, as we saw, of one's life or some of the discourses there. Whereas solution focused therapy will bring forth conversations that center around the here and now and some of the solutions to very specific problems. Both narrative and solution focused therapy have very structured interventions, whereas with collaborative language, there isn't necessarily a specific intervention, kind of like we talked about prior, and the focus tends to be on the process of therapy itself. Narrative and solution focused therapy focus heavily on the solutions, whereas collaborative focuses more on the relationship between client and therapist. All right, utilization. So utilizing a postmodern approach does allow clients the opportunity to explore outside some of the narrower elements of a traditional psychotherapy approach. Western ideology is continually seeking progressiveness, and so too should those therapeutic ideals. Antiquated approaches to therapy can very much so feed into the stigmas that serve as barriers from people coming to therapy in the first place. So some of the old psychotherapy approaches of, when you look at traditional ways of which therapy used to work, you come in and, a therapist, this is your problem, this is how you're going to fix it. We live in an era now where that's, not what people want to hear. There is just the fact that, people want to be able to take that control and ownership, and they need to be able to create those solutions for their own problems because that's the empowering piece behind it. So, and again, there's the fact that people are not going to change until they are ready to change. And when people are ready to change, they need to be in the driver's seat in order to truly facilitate that change. Thus, the postmodern approaches to therapy are crucial and should certainly be used in today's therapeutic settings. All right. And to sum it all up, whether therapists utilize solution focused, narrative, or collaborative therapies, they are embarking on a journey that will allow clients to set the pace for their own healing. This is crucial under the postmodern theory as it posits that we are the makers of our own realities and structure our lives in a way that we see fit. The major theme behind all three of these series is the ability to empower clients and let them leave their therapeutic session ready for change and ready to take on the world in new and profound ways. All right. Some of the references I used today are listed here. We have a solution-focused brief therapy, which was a scholarly project. We have collaborative therapy, relationships and conversations that make a difference, which comes straight from our textbook. What is social constructionism? This was interesting, as I talked about constructionism in the beginning. This is retrieved from the website here. And on solution focused therapy, narrative therapy, and distinctions that make a difference. This is where I was able to find some of those similarities and differences between the therapies. Strategy development through interview techniques from narrative therapy. Again, learning about narrative therapy here. This came from the Journal of Organizational Change. Anglo-American postmodernity, philosophical perspectives on science, religion, and ethics. This is where I was able to find a lot of the postmodern stuff that I talked about in the beginning. Coming from the Journal of Narrative Therapy and Community was narrative practice and community assignments. Again, just being able to find stuff on narrative therapy. And then whose story is it anyway? An interdisciplinary approach to postmodernism, narrative, and therapy. So again, this was a lot of it seems like it's about narrative therapy, but a lot of these references spoke of the other therapies as well. So I want to thank you so much for listening and viewing my presentation, and I look forward to any feedback that you may have. Thank you so much.